Ladies and gentlemen, Erev Tov, welcome to the Begin Center. Welcome to the, I think, ninth and final event in this series on the Prime Ministers. The buck stops here. We began, I think, way back in May with David Ben-Gurion. We are concluding with Ariel Sharon. We have with us a wonderful guest. I think you'll agree that there's been an incredible lineup of guest speakers for this, and I'm sure tonight will be no different. Shlomo Brom, Brigadier General. Shlomo Brom has been for a very long time, a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv. After a very long career in the IDF, his most senior post in the IDF was Director of the Strategic Planning Division in the planning branch of the General Staff. He participated in peace negotiations with the Palestinians, Jordan, Syria, and in Middle East regional security talks during the 1990s. In 2000, he was Deputy National Security Advisor, and he was also a member of the Meridor Committee, established by the Ministry of Defense to re-examine the security strategy and doctrine of the State of Israel. He's authored several books, including Israel and South Lebanon in the Absence of a Peace Treaty with Syria, and has edited and co-edited many other collections. It's a great pleasure to have you with us, Brigadier General Shlomo Brom. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What I want to do today with Ariel Sharon, the mic. Can everyone still hear the feedback? Is there a problem with that? Yeah? Okay, we'll deal with that. Do you want to try, Steve? He went, he should be coming back. So. Okay. All right, we'll try and fix that as we go. Okay, so turn this down a little, maybe that'll help. Okay, is that better? Any better? No? Same? You can hear me? Okay, very good. All right. So Ariel Sharon had a very long storied career in the military as a general, obviously, and as in many respects, one of the great military heroes of Israel. Also a very controversial career. We're not going to get too much into that, although you can ask questions when it comes to question time. What I want to do, though, is really focus on his period as Prime Minister, because it was as Prime Minister that he had, I think, in many respects, the most eventful, relatively short, but eventful period as Prime Minister, because he gets elected at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of 2001, as the Second Intifada is beginning. And he is the Prime Minister that takes us through that very, very dramatic period in Israel's history, right? So before October 7th, we're talking about really the most destructive period for Israeli civilians, certainly. If you think about the suicide bombings that were going on the streets of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, for several years from that period. And then, of course, he ends his time as Prime Minister, or almost ends his time as Prime Minister, with the disengagement from Gaza, another very dramatic moment. So I want to talk with Shlomo Brom, who was really one of, I think, the experts writing about the Second Intifada at the time of the Second Intifada, analyzing, assessing what was going on. And I want to start with a simple question, which is that Sharon came to the Prime Ministership. He replaces Ehud Barak. The Second Intifada has started. He's elected as this hardliner, right? He has this reputation, I think deserved, as a very hawkish man. Do you think, what did he bring to the role of Prime Minister, particularly at that time of the Second Intifada?
Well, first of all, he brought his experience. During the line of his career, he acquired vast experience in fighting terrorism, especially during the time that he was the commander of the Southern Front, we call it. And then he dealt with terrorism in the Gaza Strip and was very successful in dealing with it at that time, during 69, I'm talking about these years. 70. So he brought his vast experience, his military experience, namely, the military could not fool him out, could not tell him stories, come with excuses,
Right.
And my assumption is always that all of us are human beings. And human beings are making mistakes, are making excuses when they fail, and so on. And that is true also for the military and for senior politicians, etc. He had vast experience in all these issues, so he could manage it well.
And the generals, and as you said, that the IDF couldn't come to him and tell him things that he knew what was going on better than they did, or at least as well as they did. And did he have the respect?
He understood it, not knew, because
Right.
the information came from the military. They were the ones that were involved with the terrorism, or more generally from the security community, whether it is the Shin Bet, the military, and so on. So, as the prime minister, of course, he got all the information, but he also understood it.
Yeah.
That is the point that I was making. When a prime minister that has no real military experience comes, it takes him a lot of time to understand really how it works in reality.
Mm. And do you think when he became prime minister, did he have a clear plan of how he was going to deal with this unprecedented terror assault? Did he have a strategy already, or it developed as the Intifada developed?
I don't think that he had a strategy. He had his instincts and his experience. And that was true not only for him, because actually the prime minister that preceded him, and that was Ehud Barak, had also a vast military experience.
Right, he was chief of staff.
And if you ask me, did Ehud Barak form a strategy to deal with the Second Intifada when it started? No, not at all. He reacted.
Right.
That is what actually is happening in these cases, because you also don't know that it is the Second Intifada.
Right.
You have terror actions that are starting. You don't know how it will develop.
Right.
Only in retrospect, we know that that is the Second Intifada, and that it took 3 years to calm it down.
Right. But as it developed, different strategies or different ideas developed. So you had the development of the security barrier, for example. You had Operation Defensive Shield, which was the retaking of Palestinian towns that had been given back to the Palestinians during the Oslo process. Again, do you think a different prime minister would have handled it differently, or was it Sharon? Was it something about the way Sharon saw not just Intifada, but also his attitude to the Palestinians as well? Because that, I think, was also maybe different from, say, Barak, right?
That is the part of the story, of course. You want me to speculate?
I do.
I am not good in speculation.
Well, Sharon's not here with us, so I'm asking you.
I am good as an analyst. I'm quite bad in speculations. I have to confess it. But it's complicated.
Okay.
In some areas, he was better. In some areas, maybe he was worse.
Okay, but what would you say? I mean, Sharon, we look back now, and when we look at that period, we can say that Sharon successfully defeated the Intifada. Would that be a fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment, because that is a fact.
Right.
nobody can say when exactly the Second Intifada stopped.
Right.
Because it's a matter of naming it, because terror actions continued.
Right.
Even after the supposed end of the Second Intifada. But when actually the intensity and the number of terror operations went down and reached a level that is sufferable, acceptable. It's very difficult to say it, but that's reality. When you live in reality in which the conflicts between us and the Palestinians is not solved, and there will be terror actions. But the question is, what is the intensity? How many of them? How severe they are? How can we deal with those that are involved in this operation more effectively or less effectively? So the Second Intifada ended 2003, beginning of 2004. There is no accurate date. And he won it. But when you ask me to say whether he was more successful than other people that could be the prime minister, I don't know. Because maybe it could be ended after a shorter period. For example.
Okay.
You have to ask yourself this question.
Fair enough. But I want to focus on, let's focus on a couple of things that were maybe specific, I don't know about specific to Sharon, but that Sharon, that had a particular focus with Sharon. One was the attitude towards Yasser Arafat. So Arafat had already, in many ways, I think, destroyed his reputation among even those on the Israeli side that felt more favorably towards him, because he walks out on the peace talks at Camp David. He turns down Clinton's offer. So there's already this idea.
He didn't walk out after the talks in Camp David.
Sorry, the Camp David talks ended and without an agreement. Right. But Barak is already saying, "Ein partner." There's no partner on the Palestinian side. But Sharon took things to another level in many respects, because what can you tell us about Sharon's personal attitude towards Arafat and the way that played out in the Intifada?
Well, of course, he had no trust at all in Arafat. And as you said, there were good reasons not to trust him. And that was affecting his policies and his decisions, certainly. So if you ask me, your basic question was about the strategy of dealing with the Intifada. So you have to start with the beginning. How Barak, in the short time that he dealt with it, did it. You know, Barak reacted as I suppose Sharon would have reacted if he was in the same position. It happened under the premiership or the leadership of Arafat, Palestine Authority. So it's the responsibility of them. They have to stop it. How do we make them stop it? By our usual response, by bombing them. So the immediate reaction to the outbreak of the Intifada was bombing the installations of the Palestinian Authority. Because we couldn't bomb the terrorists themselves. We didn't know at this stage who are they.
But then,
because if we would have known, we would have arrested them, at least in part of the territory that still was under our full control.
Yeah.
But we didn't know it at this stage. Then it didn't stop anything. So there was understanding that we have to deal with those that are involved with these terror operations, while at the same time continue to keep the pressure over Arafat and the Palestinian Authority, assuming that they can do something, which was the right assumption, because he was, at this stage, Palestinian Authority was the accepted leadership of the majority of the Palestinians. Of course, there were organizations that were operating against its policies, like Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Nothing changed, by the way, since then in this aspect. So then you started with the very difficult job of fighting against terrorist infrastructures that are involved in these terror operations. To do it effectively, you must have better intelligence than we had at this time, and the capacity to deal with them. And that was the contribution of Prime Minister Sharon during these years as the Prime Minister that is responsible for everything, for failures as well as successes. So he is responsible for his for the success. And the success eventually was a result of a good combination between intelligence and the operational side of dealing with those that are involved in terrorism. And it took 3 years to do it. And it needs, for that, the joint work, the coordination between different organizations. In this case, it's the Shabak and the military needed to improve. They needed to learn to work more quickly, more effectively, to react to everything. And eventually, the victory in the Second Intifada was a result of a policy that, in retrospect, we started to call it mowing the grass. Because there were so many people involved in these terrorist operations, and very quickly a very vast infrastructure of those that are involved developed, and you had to expose everyone and deal with everyone and give priority also, because you have to deal first with information about those that are going to do something immediately in the short run, and then deal with more basic infrastructure. And that took 3 years, more than 3 years. And actually the same system is operating until these days. And Sharon is responsible for building this very well-oiled machine, one can say. That was one critical element. The other critical element is operation. I am trying to remember the accurate English. Chomat Magen. Defensive shield. Defensive shield. Operation Defensive Shield. That is the point where the strategy shifted and became more effective. And it's not, it became not effective because, you know, larger formations of forces brigades and divisions were used, and very large operations were made in Shechem and Hebron and other cities, and in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. But because this operation, Defensive Shield, achieved something more very essential. And this something that is very essential is freedom of operations in every place in this area. Because before that, we had an agreement with the Palestinian Authority. And the Palestinian Authority was responsible for security in what was called the A areas. And actually the very populated Palestinian areas. And we were responsible for security in the other parts of these areas. And we had to regain freedom of action in the other areas. Once Defensive Shield was carried out, we reached a situation in which we could easily reach every point in this area. So and that, with good intelligence, were the keys for the success in subduing and then winning the Second Intifada.
Right, because it was these parts of Judea and Samaria, like places like Jenin and Shechem and places like that, where you had these were the hotbeds of Palestinian terror.
Because those were the places where the people lived.
Right, but as you said, those were the places where before that we didn't go in because they were Area A. They were given to the Palestinians as part of the Oslo Agreement, and so they were sort of, certainly according to the international community, they would have been off limits. But we said this is a war now. Right,
exactly.
And we're going in.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly, and he took this decision.
Right.
So once again, you ask me, could someone else do it better?
Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe someone else would have done it earlier. Maybe someone else wouldn't have done it at all because it was not necessary anymore. Because the Intifada could be stopped in another way.
Okay, all right. I'm going to move to a different area, which is the relationship with the United States.
Yeah.
And we had George Bush, second George Bush, was president. And
George W. Bush.
George W. Bush, indeed. And there's the critical moment of 9/11.
Yeah.
How does that impact things? Obviously it has a massive impact on the United States, but specifically Israel and the Second Intifada, how does it impact it?
Well, the United States was involved in trying to calm down the United States before September 11th. Its real involvement actually started around June 2001, when George Tenet, that was the director of the CIA, was sent to Israel to start and mediate between us, the Palestinians, and try to stop the Second Intifada.
Right.
It's a story that is very similar to what is happening now, in the sense that the United States is trying to achieve ceasefires, to achieve a ceasefire. Same language of the United States. But then the negotiator was George Tenet. And he developed the Tenet plan, that's it's called, steps that the Israelis should take out, steps that the Palestinians should step out. There was general agreement between Arafat and the Israeli government that they will operate according to this understanding as usual. Neither of the two sides kept it. Nothing
I feel like there's a very long list of plans.
Yeah, nothing happened.
Named after people that don't.
Nothing happened. And then came September 11. And September 11, the way that I analyzed it at that time, and I want to share it with you. Of course, I may be wrong. Every analyst makes mistakes, but I believe that I was not wrong at this time. There was actually an opportunity to stop the Second Intifada. And the opportunity was born because after September 11, Arafat was panicked. He was panicked because always his game was, and I am not trying to portray Arafat as a person that is better from what he was. He was always weighing whether to use terrorism or to use politics, namely create relationship with the world powers, United States, the Europeans, pay what he needs to pay for it to get his purpose, which was the Palestinian state. And he was panicked after September 11 because the way that he understood it, and he understood it rightly, I think, is that the world that could serve his political purposes, that was the West, the United States and the European powers, their reaction to September 11 would be to identify the Palestinians with the perpetrators of September 11. It's the same thing. Islamic extremists that made the September 11 and the Intifada that is made by the Palestinians is the same thing. And he will lose completely his relationship with this part of the international community that is important to him for his political purposes. And he was in a point in which he was willing to make a real effort to stop the Intifada. Real effort is not only to accept a ceasefire. Because if he accepts a ceasefire, that means that Fatah, that is party, that has a militia of his own, that was Tanzim, and the Tanzim participated in the Second Intifada. Right. That means that he can instruct the Tanzim to stop the Intifada, and he could do it at any point. But he couldn't do it with the other organizations. He had to fight the other Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and smaller other groups. But then he was in a situation in which he was willing to do it. And once again, the US mediated a ceasefire, and this time, Arafat, with his forces, started a real effort to stop it. And we started to see that it works. The number of terror actions went down dramatically. And the nature of our fraud, the number of casualties that we had in this. And there was a feeling that it is going to work. And then the IDF couldn't resist the temptation.
Do what?
To do what we are calling in Hebrew, in a clean language, sikul memukad. I don't know if you are familiar with this term in Hebrew, which means killing the people that are involved in terrorism.
Like assassinations.
Assassinations.
Yeah.
There was an opportunity to assassinate a senior guy in the Tanzim, the militia of Fatah, that actually kept the ceasefire, stopped completely their operations against Israel, but he had an history. He was involved in killing of Israelis at the beginning of the Intifada. So there was a decision to assassinate him. It was done in January 2002. And then all hell broke out.
When you say a decision...
Because what happened is that not only that the Tanzim stopped fighting against the other organization and the small and arresting them, etc., but the joint in completely, and also they completely changed their policies. Before that, there was a difference between Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Popular Front for Liberation, etc., all this organization, and Tanzim. The policy of Tanzim was to initiate terror operations, but only in the area of the West Bank. Because of the assassination of this guy, they decided that they are also going to move and start terror operations in Israel.
Across the Green Line.
Across the Green Line. And then there was a series of terrible terror operations. If you remember, those that were living in Israel at this time, the terror operations at the Dolphinarium in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, the nightclub.
The nightclub. The terror operations in the Park Hotel in Netanyahu, in the Seder night, in which 30 people were killed by a suicide bomber. And those were the operations that led to the decision of Sharon to give the okay to Operation Defensive Shield.
But when you say the IDF couldn't resist the temptation to assassinate this leader in the Tanzim, presumably they would have had to get the okay from Prime Minister, from the Sharon, right?
Yeah, sorry.
We called this series "The Buck Stops Here" because we wanted to make it clear that the Prime Minister makes the decision. But in your opinion, it seems that was the wrong decision. But this was Sharon's decision.
This was my assumption is that he gave the authorization for this operation.
Right.
I cannot say it. Say it authoritatively because at that time I was already not in the military. And there is always a policy, what kind of operations you need to get the confirmation of the Minister of Defense, the Chief of Staff, the Minister of Defense, the Prime Minister. But I assume it was an important enough assassination, and probably he authorized it.
Yeah. I want to go to questions from the audience soon. But
And by the way, because we are talking about a historical period, the same thing happened some 10 years before that.
Okay.
After the assassination of Prime Minister Rabin, when Peres was the Prime Minister, there was a stage in which the same Arafat decided that he has to overcome his internal reservations and he has to fight Hamas and prevent it. Prevent their efforts to undermine the political process with Israel. Once again, not because he is a just man, a good man, etc., but because it was his interest. And that was the year 1996.
And this is a time when Hamas are letting off doing suicide bombs for the first time in Israel.
Suicide bombing to torpedo, to undermine the political process between Israel and the Palestinians.
Yeah.
And Arafat was not doing what he should have done to prevent it.
Sure.
But again, that was the first time. He reached a point when he decided to do it.
Right.
So he arrested, for example, the leaders of Hamas in Gaza, and in prison they cut their beards, which was very humiliated to them as
in the Palestinian prison.
In the Palestinian prison, to humiliate them, to make them stop, and so on. And it worked then, at the beginning of 96. And it was the same assassination. There was an operational chance to assassinate a senior Hamas terrorist that was called the engineer. You remember that? Yahya Ayash. And not by the IDF, by the Mossad. That was a beautiful Mossad operations, because they succeeded in providing him with a smartphone. And the smartphone, like the beepers in the war with Hezbollah, was loaded with explosives. And he was assassinated. And then, of course, everything exploded also with Hamas and Arafat, etc. So in my opinion, it could be, because I cannot say it certainly.
Of course. Okay. So what I want to do before I go to questions is I want to turn to the end of Sharon's time as Prime Minister. Or near the end, where he of course implements the disengagement from Gaza, which was this huge shock, not least because Sharon had been so associated with the building of settlements, and then he's the first Israeli Prime Minister let's take Sinai out of the equation, but certainly in the areas in Gaza and the West Bank, to evacuate settlements in those areas. And all the settlements in Gaza, and I think 3 settlements in the northern Shomron in the northern West Bank, are evacuated. Summer of 2005, and this is a tremendous shock to the system. Divides the country, of course. In your assessment, I don't know if you were writing about it at the time. In your assessment, what was Sharon's? How did Sharon go from the person that we thought he was, this hardline right-wing settlement builder, to the guy who's pulling settlements out of Gaza and parts of the West Bank?
I would say, and that of course is my assessment,
Sure.
that I believe in two things about Sharon. First of all, that he was an Israeli patriot. And he did what he thought is good for the state of Israel. He could have been mistaken, of course. But what he thought that is good for the state of Israel, for the Jewish people, for the people of Israel. That is one thing. The other thing is that he had a very flexible mind.
Mm.
He was not an ideologue.
Right. Pragmatist.
He was a pragmatist.
Yeah.
So I think that when he decided on the unilateral disengagement from the Gaza Strip, he believed that it will make it easier for Israel to keep Judea and Samaria that are more important. He believed that Gaza is mostly a burden.
Mostly a burden.
A burden than something useful.
Right.
So that was the first point. Now, he was also a politician. So, of course, he had political motivations. And I know that, like many other politicians, he also liked money. And he liked connections with people that are with good fortunes. But I don't accept the theory that he has done it because that will make the left support him, so it will be good political with him and will protect him from the corruption accusation, etc., etc. Without, of course, judging whether he was corrupt here or corrupt there. Possibly. It's quite common among politicians. But I don't think it was his motivation. It's too simplistic, and he was a strong person. I don't think he was really afraid. That presented as a frightened a person that makes such radical decisions because of fear that something bad will happen to him. That is not the Sharon that I knew. There may be other motivations. For example, now at my very advanced age, I have to remember what was the number of the guy that was the director of the ministry, the prime minister. And likes to talk. It was interviewed many times. Without a name, he was very close to Sharon and was the director of the prime minister office and his close advisor. And one in the interviews that he made many years after Sharon passed away, he said, one of the motivations that led Sharon to decide on the unilateral disengagement was the Geneva Agreement.
The
Geneva Agreement, which is not really an agreement. It is a suggestion for agreement.
Right, I want to make sure people know what we're talking about. You're going to explain?
I was starting to explain. You know, a group of Palestinians that was actually very strongly connected with the Palestinian Authority, with the people around Arafat, etc., with influence, and a group of Israelis that were not connected with the Sharon government, were connected with the governments of the Oslo process.
Led by Yossi Beilin.
Led by Yossi Beilin, met for, I think it was 2 years. It was very serious discussions. And what they did, they discussed, they said, we are trying to convince the Israeli public and the political sphere and the government that an agreement that will serve the two sides is possible. So let's sit down and negotiate such an agreement, very detailed one. And they negotiate a document, very detailed one, with exactly the borderline between the two entities, the Palestinian state and the state of Israel, and all the other arrangements, the security arrangements, the economic arrangements, the infrastructure arrangements, everything. Very detailed. That is one of the problems. It's difficult to convince the people that it is something that is plausible, because to believe it, they have to read it. But it is a book. I am joking. Trying at least to joke. And you know, when the Geneva Agreement was presented, many people all over the world were very enthusiastic because of it. It immediately gained the support of the US government, European governments, and so on. And what this guy, that I forgot his name, was saying, Sharon thought that it will make our position very difficult.
Because the international community.
Because the international community will make a pressure, serious pressure, and ask us, well, there is a suggestion, a very good suggestion. What are you suggesting? What are you doing? You are not doing anything. You are only continuing with this terrible conflict. And so Sharon reached the conclusion that, well, Gaza is actually only a burden. We can keep security without it. And we can, by that, keep our relationship with all the states that are important from our point of view. So we should do it.
Right.
Whether this explanation is real, is true or not, I don't know.
I mean, there's a logic to it, because certainly the international community got very excited by the disengagement plan, was very supportive of the idea of Israel withdrawing. Okay, I'm going to ask one last thing. So this Sharon, as I said, is the last in our series that we're doing here. He's also the last prime minister from the founding generation of the State of Israel. So without making any judgments, obviously, about prime ministers since then or anything like that, do you think, is there something significant about that generation, the fact that we're now past that generation, we now no longer have leaders of that founding generation, of Sharon and Rabin and Peres and Ben-Gurion and Golda and all of those people? And is there something that is there something we've lost, do you think, from that? Something that they added that we, again, through no fault of subsequent prime ministers who were just too young to be part of that. But have we lost something?
Very difficult question, because usually I am trying not to be too nostalgic.
Okay.
which is a tendency as you advance with your age, you become nostalgic. Well, as I said before, I believe that human beings are complex beings. So I am trying, usually trying very hard not to look at people in a very one-dimensional way. This one is good, this one is bad, so this one is completely good and this one is completely bad. So I support this one and I oppose this one. People are much more complicated. But the real difference that I see between this generation and the current generation is that the fact that the previous generation was more engaged with big ideas, big politics, than small politics.
Right.
I am fed up with the small politics.
Small politics. Yeah.
With between the different parties and this one. I don't think that Sharon, although he was a good politician,
sure.
He knew how to play the political game.
Yeah.
But he didn't let himself, when it concerned the big decisions, to be engaged with small politics.
Yeah.
Which is very difficult to find among present-day politicians.
It's really interesting you say that, because there was a quote I found, which I don't know if someone heard Sharon say it or it was attributed to Sharon, that he said that we meaning his generation, the founding generation, we were leaders of Israel, and after us, they'll just be politicians.
Exactly.
Which may or may not be the case, but it's an interesting.
Let me give an example that is always always makes me angry, and I'm not angry easy. It's not easy to make something that will really make me angry, and that is the issue of public opinion polls.
Public opinion polls, okay.
And why it makes me angry? Because the basic assumption of everyone, the politicians, as well as the media, and as a result of that, as well of many in the public itself, is that we are talking about one-way street, which means there is something that is called public opinion, and the politician learns what is public opinion, and that then acts accordingly. That is completely wrong, according to my understanding of history. Who is the real politician? The real leader, sorry, not politician. The real leader is the one that is making the big decisions because he thinks that it's good for the nation, and then convince public opinion that that is the real thing to do.
Yeah.
That was always the case.
Right.
That was the case with Begin when he decided to make peace with Egypt.
Yeah.
You know, if you would ask, and it's not I saying if, this public opinion were actually carried out.
Yeah.
During all the years before 80, when the peace treaty with Egypt was signed. If you would have asked questions the people, questions like, what is more important? To keep our control over the Sinai Peninsula or to have peace with Egypt? What would have been the answer of the majority of the Israeli public? I know, because these questions were asked. The majority of Israeli public opinion said it's much more important to keep Sinai.
Yeah.
No. Then Begin decided that it's not true and made exactly the opposite decision. And it happened almost overnight. The Israeli public supported it.
Yeah.
And that is real leadership, not what current politicians are doing.
Okay.
And I believe that Sharon was this kind of leader. I am critical of quite a number of things that is done, and I voiced some of my critique here. But I think he was this kind of leader.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, let's have some questions. There's a gentleman here with yes. If you can stand up and I might repeat the questions so that our audience and the recording can hear as well.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Chaim, and I wanted to hear your opinion on how you think the events of the aftermath, fallout, if you will, of Sabra Shatila affected Sharon as his prime minister.
Okay, the question was how the effects of the Sabra and Shatila massacre affected Sharon. Okay, is everyone familiar with what we're talking about here? Okay.
Affected Sharon himself or affected my
Affected Sharon.
perception of Sharon?
Affected Sharon himself.
Sharon himself. Okay.
And his prime ministership.
His prime ministership. You know, as I said, I can be very critic of Sharon. I think the way his decisions, the way that his policy decisions at that time, at 82 and before 82, and that led up to the war, what is called now the first Lebanon war, and the way he managed the war, the way he managed our relationship with the Christian militias and leadership in Lebanon, which was one of the main reasons for Sabra and Shatila. I am, of course, like many other people, very critical of it. But I think that you asked me the question, how the past of Sharon affected Sharon himself. I think it had much effect on Sharon himself. He understood that he made mistakes. And I think that eventually it made him a better leader.
Because he learned.
He learned. He was capable of learning. So,
do you think that he, because one of the results of that, of course, was that he had to resign as defense minister. Do you think that gave him a sense that he, because a lot of people thought then that his political career was
ended.
Over. Do you think that gave him additional
drive
to go on and, if someone had said to him then, you're going to become prime minister in 18 years, that would have seemed impossible, but. I know you don't
I said that I don't like speculation. My impression is that of Sabra and Shatila, of his resignation from the post of the Minister of Defense, he understood that he cannot be the prime minister, which was the white consensus.
Yeah.
And because I don't think that after 82, during the 90s, etc., one could imagine that there could be circumstances in which Sharon can be again a prime minister.
Yeah.
But he decided that he wanted to play an important role in the political arena.
Yeah.
And made an effort to stay in the political arena and succeeded in being that because he continued to get under other ministerial positions in the governments that were formed by the Likud party. More minor ones, like the Minister of Agriculture and so on. And then there were the circumstances that led to a complete change in the situation, and he could become a prime minister. But I don't believe that he could foresee it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody could foresee it.
Right. Okay, yeah.
Aside from all these critical decisions on military and defense, did he make any other faithful decisions in domestic areas that we live with? Agriculture, education, housing, immigration. Was there anything big, or was he absolutely consumed with all these defense things that we've been talking about? That
I believe that during these years he was absolutely consumed with the issue of security. But that is a point that I didn't make, and I think that it should be made now that you are asking me. In my opinion, one of the important traits of a good leader should be his ability to convene around himself other good people and to work with them. And Sharon had this capability. So for example, in the Sharon government, Netanyahu was the Minister of Finance.
Right.
And he was a good Minister of Finance. Because Netanyahu is a capable person. I don't want to talk about politics and about what he's doing now, whether I am for it or against it. Everyone has his view. But I think everyone knows that he is a talented person. And the political environment was also, I think, making it possible. He was managing the economic issues that are very important, especially when you have a crisis like the Second Intifada. And he was doing it well. So I think that Sharon didn't need to engage a lot with these kind of issues.
Right. He delegated.
He delegated it to good people.
Right.
And he had good ministers in his government.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, in the front row. Can you stand up?
do you think Sharon plans to do further withdrawals from the West Bank if he hadn't had this phone and
Okay, so the question was, does Shlomo think that Sharon would have gone on to do further withdrawals from the West Bank if he hadn't been incapacitated by a stroke?
It's quite possible. I think because, as I said, Sharon had a flexible mind. So the fact that he made this withdrawal from the Gaza Strip because he thought that it will help us keep all the settlements and Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, everything. Doesn't mean that he couldn't change his mind also in this area. And there were, as far as I remember, the final years of the Sharon government, there were indications that he was thinking on a partial withdrawal.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right. He had, there was the theory was, if I remember, that he had this idea of, he didn't trust the Palestinians, so he didn't want to, he didn't
So
believe
he
in
was
believe in-
thinking about unilateral
Right. He didn't
partial
believe in sitting
withdrawal.
down with them, so he
Yeah.
would draw the borders himself. He would draw where the borders
Yes,
were.
exactly.
Right.
Which was actually part of how this plan was called.
What was the Hebrew?
No, there was a plan of the quartet. At that time, there was a quartet that was led by the United States.
The US, the
and
EU, Russia, and the UN.
And they divide a graduate plan built of different stages.
Right.
And actually, the plan was based on the assumptions that the two sides accept the two-state solution.
Right.
But the question is, of course, what is the two-state solution? What is the border?
Yeah.
What are the security authorities, etc.? And then, according to this plan, the first stage should have been end of the Second Intifada, because it was devised during the second. I remember the name. It was called the road plan.
The roadmap.
The roadmap.
The roadmap.
The roadmap.
Right.
The roadmap. So the first stage was ceasefire, end of the Intifada. Second stage was unilateral withdrawal of Israel, acceptance of the two states, namely that Israel also will recognize the Palestinian states, but on provisional borders, because those borders are not final. And then there will be a negotiation, and the assumption is that the final stage is the final border and the final arrangements.
Peace at last.
And that, of course, didn't materialize for known reasons.
Right. Yes, in the back.
Funny, there ever came a time when the Prime Minister regretted his decision to evacuation of Palestine?
Did Sharon
regret
I mean, he
it?
didn't have a lot of time because this engagement happened in summer of 2005, and then by January, February, he's in a coma.
Between that period.
Okay. Do you have any sense that he regretted his decision?
No. There is no chance that he regretted it. Because if he would have regretted it, for example, then he wouldn't continue developing ideas of another, partial disengagement, this time in the eastern side of Israel.
Right. Okay. There was a lady at the back.
That was my question.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Very good. Great minds think alike. So two people right next to each other. Okay, you first with the glasses. Yeah.
During the first Lebanon war, there are people who say that Sharon misled Begin, that Begin only approved the Litani River. Sharon went beyond that. Can you give us some insight into that?
Okay, so the question about whether Sharon, there's a debate To what extent did Sharon mislead Begin during the First Lebanon War? And you can give your opinion, and obviously there's different opinions about this.
I think that he misled him.
Okay,
That is part of my critique.
fair enough.
And what I can say about Sharon in general is that he was not reluctant of lies when it served its purpose.
Right. I think Ben Gurion said something similar about it.
Yeah.
Famously.
So, you know, I can talk about my personal memories of the First Lebanon War. Although I was not a senior officer at this time, I was only kept, what was, no, why I am belittling myself? I was.
Be proud.
Yeah. I was at the time of this war, I was a lieutenant colonel. And I was in an important post when it concerns this war, because at that time I was at the Air Force Intelligence, and that was my arena. I was responsible for Syria and Lebanon. So I was leading the group of intelligence officers and soldiers that were creating the intelligence and providing the intelligence that allowed the Air Force fight in Lebanon and in Syria. And so I was well reported of the plans to have a war in Lebanon and what we are going to do and so on. And at the same time, I was reading newspapers. And in the newspapers, I was reading that the government of Israel accepted the plan of Minister of Defense, shared by the Prime Minister Begin at the time, to start the war in Lebanon, and the plan is to reach the 40-kilometer line, etc. But I knew the plans. From the beginning, we planned to reach Beirut. And that was according to because the Minister of Defense, Sharon, ordered us to make these plans. So I know for sure that he misled the government. If he misled Begin personally, or maybe Begin was partner to misleading the government, which is another possibility. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't participate in the
get away with
talks,
that in
I
this
don't know.
Fair enough. Okay.
Because you know that in Israeli government, and not always the other ministers are getting the information that the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense have. That's a fact of life.
Okay, yes.
Was there any regret at all in the unilateral pull-out from Gaza that there was nothing given in return on the other side, on the Hamas side? In other words, Hamas perceived this as a victory for them because Israel was withdrawing and had to give nothing in return for that withdrawal. Did that factor into any of the political thinking, the narratives at that time?
Well, it wouldn't have been Hamas giving back, because the Palestinian Authority controlled Gaza at the time.
No trade-off.
Right.
We gave an incredible piece of land, the Riviera of the Middle East, to back to the Palestinians, but nothing was given in return in terms of possible negotiations for something worthwhile in return.
Right. So
you are asking actually whether unilateral steps of this kind are helpful. Well, I can say what is my personal opinion. And my personal opinion is that we should not have kept Gaza. Because of the reasons that some of the reasons that Sharon gave Gaza back, because it's completely crazy to think that you can keep a territory with 2 million people and growing by having the settlements with, I don't know how many people were in these settlements, 8,000 people or something like that. So in the long run, it was a mistake to keep Gaza. I do believe that it was a mistake to do it unilaterally. I think that it should have been done in the framework of an agreement with the Palestinians, in which, as you said, other issues are also negotiated, and it is a part of a process, not a one-time decision, a one-time action. To make it clearer, there are two possible narratives of everything that we are going through now. One narrative is that the conflict with the Palestinians is something that is never going to end, that cannot be ended, and we have to manage it. And because of it, there is no real political process that can reach eventually some results. So you have to engage only with decisions that are having limited time effect, and there will be always violent crisis.
Mowing the grass, as you said.
Mowing the grass.
Yeah.
That is one narrative. The other narrative is that all your security and military achievement eventually are going nowhere, are leading nowhere, if they have no political part. And political part is agreements with the other party. Different levels of agreement. And because you know your decision, your personal decisions, which one of the narrative you accept, depends on your political outlook, on your political beliefs. I don't want to expand too much on that. Everyone with his own set of beliefs.
Okay, let's have one last question. Okay, two quick questions. Yes, and then hit it. Yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment about the generational analysis that you made one before and one now.
Yeah.
I'm really able to.
Can you stand up? Can you stand up?
To satisfy you that in fact, today, recently, we have a government that has begun to realize its mistakes and take the consequences and deal with very, very big survival issues and not small political issues.
Okay, I don't want to get into contemporary politics, but I appreciate the comment, but I don't want to get into contemporary politics. Yeah. But thank you.
I say that I don't want to get into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Final question.
Thank you. I was intrigued by the point you made earlier about there were moments where Arafat was ready to pull back and stop attacks on Israel, and we blew it by doing targeted assassination.
And as I said, we had an history in doing that.
Right,
it's not the first time.
I was just wondering, like, what you think the potential was if we hadn't done those targeted assassinations. Were we on the verge of an agreement with Palestinians?
No.
Well, I just want to make sure everyone.
No, I didn't say that.
I just want to make sure everyone understands the question. The question was when Shlomo made the point about Arafat being ready to stop. To tone down the terrorism, and the IDF had made the assassinations and therefore destroyed that chance. The question was, what was the potential for Arafat to actually lead? Could there actually been an agreement that led out of this? Did we actually blow the chance of a big breakthrough?
Let me answer this question, but by making a comparison between two persons, two Palestinians. One of them is Yasser Arafat. The other one is Mahmoud Abbas. Abu Ammar and Abu Mazen. You know that they like these nicknames. You know, I think, and I think that this time I'm saying it categorically, which usually I'm not doing. Everyone that is saying the opposite is either lying or very much mistaken, is that Abu Mazen was very good to Israel. Why Abu Mazen was very good to Israel? Because he's one of the Lamed Vav. Because he loved Jews? No. Because in his long career, that included also quite a long chapter of being a terrorist, being a member of terrorist organization, Fatah, he came into the conclusion, without giving up his national aspirations, and his national aspirations are clear. He wants a Palestinian state for the Palestinian people. But he reached the conclusion, he personally, that to achieve his national goal, he has to reach a political agreement with Israel based on the two-state solution that will live peacefully side by side. That is Abu Mazen. And I know that some people are think differently, but the difference between me and many of the Israelis is that I was inside the negotiations for many years. As a professional person, as a military person, I have seen these people, I heard them. And after I retirement, I had several chances to talk with Abu Mazen. I became convinced that he is sincere. He really thinks so. And Arafat was also, basically, all these people are Palestinian patriots. And as Palestinian patriots, they were believing that they should get their national goal, which I described for many years by terrorist actions, then move to the political process. Now, I don't see what is inside the mind or inside the heart of people. We know that inside the heart there is only blood, but we believe the way that our language is built, that there are emotions inside our heart. That is why I use this term. So I don't know what was inside the mind and the heart of Arafat. Maybe all he wanted is to deceive us. I know that people are believing it. But he started a political process. He reached an agreement with us. He kept basically this agreement until the Second Intifada, with some violations. There were violations in the Palestinian side, there were violations also in the Israeli side. If an agreement was reached, partial agreement, another one on ceasefire in the Intifada, maybe negotiations would have started. Maybe there would have been progress in the political process. I don't know. I'm not a prophet. But these possibilities existed. And the only thing that I am saying is that we blew up this possibility. Could it be that there was a ceasefire, and like many other ceasefire, after several months it would have erupted again? Maybe. I'm not a prophet, as I said.
Okay. I want to thank Shlomo Brom very much. I want to thank everyone. I actually found a quote from the great historian, Israeli historian Anita Shapira about Sharon, which speaks to something that Shlomo himself said here this evening. He was talking about Sharon and how he said that she says that he was it was after he died and how we would remember him. And she said he was a pragmatist who knew how to change gears, change ideology, meet the demands of reality, and respond to the wishes of the people. In the end, we forgave him for his sins, and they were many, and remembered his virtues and leadership. I think it's a nice sort of eulogy for him. Shlomo Brom, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. This is the end of the series. We have a new series starting 2nd of September on the presidents of Israel, starting with Chaim Weizmann. So, as I said before, if you're not on my mailing list, email me, join the mailing list. You'll also get links to all the recordings. Thank you very much. Good night.